Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the book of Habakkuk. And we're in chapter 3, verse 3, and we're going to read through verse 15. So after the two questions and the two answers, Habakkuk prays a prayer after this period of silence. He prays a prayer, which we looked at in verses 1 and 2, in which he is completely accepting of the righteousness of what God has said and of the judgment that God has pronounced upon Judah. He just asks that in the midst of his wrath to remember mercy, remember the covenant that we have with each other, and give us some grace based upon that covenant. So verses 3 through 15 celebrates God as the conqueror, and it mirrors and exceeds what God has said about Babylon. God has described Babylon in chapter 1 as this fierce, ruthless, irresistible conqueror. He's going to describe God as an irresistible conqueror that fills up the whole universe, that no one is able to stand against. But he's going to do it in a very militaristic way, and in a way that recalls so many of Israel's past victories from God. So he's going to talk about, you know, storms and floods and he's going to talk about the earth opening up, and he's going to talk about the sun standing still. And he's going to take us back to Korah's rebellion and how the earth swallowed up, those people. He's going to remind them how the Philistines in their chariots were stuck in the mud after the downpour that he sent, and they were slaughtered. He's going to remind us of the day Joshua and the people fought the men of Gibeah and the sun stood still. He's going to remind us of all those things, God's victories in the past, that are going to allow him to see two coordinates, the past and the present, and then plot a future and know that there will be a hope in the future, but that what's about to happen is going to happen, and there's no turning back. It is irrevocable. So let's read 3 through 15. God comes from Teman, and the Holy One from Mount Paran. This is the south. I mean, right at the bottom of the promised land. Teman is a city of the Edomites, and he's going to have some other um, geographic references later. Amalek, not Amalek, but Midian and Cush, and again south, very much south. She's talking about south to north, which is interesting because the Babylonians are going to invade from the north. So God's victory is coming up from the south. God comes from Teman, and the Holy One from Mount Paran. His splendor covers the heavens, and the earth is full of his praise. Heaven and earth, the entire universe filled with the radiance or brilliance of God. His radiance is like the sunlight. He has rays flashing from his hand, and there is the hiding of his power. Before him goes pestilence, and plague comes after him. He looked and startled the nations. Yes, the perpetual mountains were shattered, the ancient hills collapsed. His ways are everlasting. I saw the tents of Cushan under distress. The tent curtains of the land of Midian are trembling. Did the Lord rage against the rivers? Or was thine anger against the rivers? Or was thy wrath against the sea, that thou didst ride on your horse, on your chariots of salvation? Thy bow was made bare, the rods of chastisement were sworn. Thou didst cleave the earth with rivers. The mountains saw thee and quaked. The downpour of water swept by. The deep uttered forth its voice. It lifted high its hands. Sun and moon stood in their place, at the radiance of thy gleaming spear. The indignation in indignation thou didst march to the earth. In anger you trampled the nations. Thou didst go forth for the salvation of your people. For you struck the head of the house of evil, to lay him open from thigh to neck. He's vivisected evil. Thou pierced with his own spears the head of his throngs. They stormed in to scatter us. Their exultation was like those who devour the oppressed in secret. Thou didst tread on the sea with thy horses, on the surge of many waters. So God is celebrated for his radiance, his brilliance, his beauty, his splendor, which fills the entire universe, which connects with things that Paul says about God's omnipresence in Colossians chapters 1 and 2. And then he celebrates him as a judge, and how he surveys the earth, and everyone quakes in his presence. And then he celebrates him as a conqueror, as a military conqueror, riding his horse, and brings up all those images, the dead Egyptians in the sea in the Red Sea, when the Red Sea collapsed down on them, the day the sun stood still, the way the Philistine chariots were swamped in the mud, all these victories that God had given them in the past. And it's a reminder that if they are still covenanted to God, and God is still their God, and we know he's taken care of us in the past, then he's taken care of us now and will take care of us in the future. In fact, that realization is there in verse 13. You go forth for the salvation of your people, for the salvation of your anointed. The anointed one is the king, of course, and of course the anointed one kind of looks forward to the Messiah and connects this with the Messiah. Um, anyway, um, um, but this section celebrates God as a conqueror, going forth, and 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 one who is not going to be resisted at all by anyone, and it celebrates that, even though the first object of that judgment, of that going forth, is Judah itself. Okay, so he has accepted the facts, and he knows they're not changeable. And in his head, he has accepted them. Um, but in his inward parts, he still trembles. So next time, we're going to have this wonderful statement of faith beginning in verse 16 of chapter 13. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.